and welcome to Crosstalk. I'm Peter Lavelle. 65 years ago, the Nazi death camp Auschwitz was liberated by Soviet forces. How should we remember the genocide against Europe's Jews? And is memory of the Holocaust abused for political purposes? To discuss this, I'm joined by Norman Finkelstein in New York, a political analyst and the author of the book, The Holocaust Industry, Reflections on the Exploitation of Jewish Suffering. And in Jerusalem, we have Professor Israel Charny, the executive director of the Institute on Holocaust and Genocide. Okay, crosstalk rules are in effect. That means, gentlemen, you can jump in anytime you want. I'd like to go to you first, Norman, here. You claim that the Holocaust is an industry. First of all, what is that? And should we be offended by it? Because certainly some people are.
The Holocaust has now been drained of any moral content. It's simply a weapon used by Israel and its supporters to deflect criticism of Israeli policy. And it was also for a long period used as a blackmail weapon to extract what was called compensation for needy Holocaust victims, but which was in fact the shakedown racket of Europe.
Okay, we go to Jerusalem now. Israel, would you agree with that assessment? Something tells me that you don't.
Something tells you. Something tells you that today is not a day in the Colosseum where Finkelstein and Charny are to go at each other. Today is a day of international remembrance of the Holocaust. And I would begin with a reverence, with a depth of feeling, of memory, for victims who suffered unbearably. And I would continue, without rushing, from there to the meanings of the Holocaust for all human beings. I will later address the kinds of things that Finkelstein just said, but they're totally inappropriate right now at the beginning of an event that is tied to an appropriate memorial for human beings.
Israel, I don't think
perished.
anybody here denies the Holocaust happened, okay? We're here to talk about what it means. And Norman thinks it's a money-making machine for some individual.
It's a money-making machine.
Go ahead, Norman.
It's a money-making machine. It's a money-making machine, and it's also a political weapon. Israel Charny sits in Jerusalem and piously talks about how we should use this day to reflect and remember. But I opened up yesterday the Israeli newspapers.
Guy in the way you use words.
Right. I opened up the newspaper yesterday in Israel, and what did I read? What I read in Ynet was that Israel was going to use today, this pious day, Israel was going to use today in order to mobilize international opinion to discredit the Goldstone report. Israel was going to use today to try to discredit Richard Goldstone and get Ban Ki-moon to drop the Goldstone report. That's exactly what Haaretz reported, and that's what Yediot Ahronot reported. Israel is not using today in order to remember the suffering of the Jewish people. It's using today as a bat to break the skull, to crack the skull of Richard Goldstone. So if you have any issue with the way today is being used, you should direct your attention and you should direct your fury at your government.
Okay, Israel, would you like to reply to that?
Yeah, of course I'd like to reply.
Please do.
Beginning with my comment, Finkelstein, you're rude. You use words immediately in such an attacking way. You used a few adjectives about me after a few sentences. I don't like your way of talking. I think it is in defiance of those better values of being human beings.
All right, Israel,
that many of
Israel,
us see.
Israel, we can all criticize the way people...
Goldstone, hold on.
Go ahead.
Hold on. Goldstone, I have great respect for Justice Goldstone. What are you going to do with that? I believe that Justice Goldstone has been one of the finest contributors
to
the battle against genocide.
We're talking about you.
Norman?
So we're not talking about you either. And if we're talking about the Holocaust, I suggest we begin with a reverence, with a respect, with a caring for human life, and not with the cheap shots that you started.
Israel, I've read...
The Holocaust is only...
Israel, I've read Norman's work, okay? I can understand how some people can get upset, but there's a lot of substance there as well, and it begs replies, don't you think?
I'll be glad to respond to the substance.
Okay,
but I will not ignore the mode in which it is delivered, including now.
Respond to the comments of your government yesterday. Respond to the comment of Yuri Edelstein, who compared Richard Goldstone to Hitler. How about responding to that? The Minister of Education of your country used today to compare Richard Goldstone to Adolf Hitler. How about responding to that?
I'll be glad to respond to that. I have the strongest criticism of the way in which Justice Goldstone has been treated by the Israeli government and by the Israeli culture. I think the treatment is unfair, it is insulting. It reminds me of the style of insults that I was complaining about a few moments ago from you.
I'm afraid we're getting off the point right here. Norman claims in his book that there are people in the world, Jewish people, making money off of the Holocaust. Can you respond to that?
I'll be glad to. I'd like to know how much money Finkelstein is making off of his attacks on people.
I don't think that answers the question.
Otherwise known as show business.
Excuse me, I don't think that.
No, it does answer the
question.
I personally, I will answer it my way, and I personally, for the last 30 years, have directed the Institute on the Holocaust and Genocide in Jerusalem, purposely with a zero salary. Now, I don't mean this information to add to my biography. I mean it as an illustration that there are countless numbers of us who are deeply devoted to the memory of the Holocaust and to work on genocides of other peoples without it being in any way an effort to gain financial return or any other kind of return.
I still don't think that answered the question.
Well, I'm not satisfied with the answer either. I mean, we do see Israel invoking the Holocaust very often to back up its foreign policy aims here. I'd like to give a listen to the Israeli Prime Minister. This is an example of, I think, the plans of Auschwitz were being presented in Jerusalem, and there's a very strong political connotation. Let's listen to what he had to say.
This is a test of humanity. This is a test of mankind. And we shall see in the coming weeks and months how the international community lives up to its responsibility to stop evil before it spreads further.
So, Israel, we have a Holocaust-related event, but it was used to rally forces against Iran, to attack Iran, essentially. I mean, is that fair to do that? Does that taint the Holocaust memory?
Mr. Lavelle.
Norman, go ahead.
Go ahead. If you'll excuse me for a moment, I have a personal responsibility here because Mr. Charney has made a number of comments which I find deeply offensive. Number one, Mr. Charney should not be pontificating to me about how I should relate to the Nazi Holocaust. It happens that my mother was in Majdanek concentration camp. My father was in Auschwitz. He was in the Auschwitz death march. And I had to live with my parents' suffering my entire life. So nobody, and I'm looking at you directly, Mr. Charney, nobody has the right to lecture me on how I should remember the Nazi Holocaust. No one, full stop. Number two, Mr. Charney, I lost my job, I lost my living, I lost my profession because I was denouncing the hooligans, the hoodlums, and the racketeers who have been exploiting the suffering of my parents. So please don't lecture me about how people make money off of the Nazi Holocaust. I am currently unemployed because I denounced the hoodlums, the hooligans, and the racketeers who exploited my parents' suffering.
Okay, we're going to go to a short break real quick.